Welcome, everybody, to the Living While Leading podcast. My name is Sharon Ehrlich, and I am the founder and CEO of Living While Leading. I empower high-performing professional women to build confidence, take control over their careers, and lead with impact. This show addresses a problem that I had early in my career, and that was that I did not have a lot of access to women leaders, women executives, and thought leaders. And so I have created this platform to amplify the voices of lots of different women on a variety of topics. And today we are lucky, and I am lucky, to have Dorothee Ritz with me here today. So welcome, Dorothee, to our show. I'm going to start by...
Thank you, Sharon, for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So before we get started with questions, I'm going to just introduce Dorothee to you. So Dorothee is a Senior Vice President and Global Leader at Kyndryl. With over 30 years experience driving digital transformation across Europe, Australia, and the US, Dorothee has been a pivotal force in the digital revolution, including an impressive 18-year tenure at Microsoft. Dorothee's career spans executive and non-executive leadership roles across for-profit and nonprofit organizations. A transformational leader and passionate advocate for lifelong learning, she is deeply committed to empowering girls and women to reach their potential. So that's something we have in common, Dorothee. Beyond her remarkable professional journey, Dorothee is also a dedicated mother of two based in Munich. I hope that you will enjoy the insights that she's going to share and some actionable strategies. Dorothee, is there anything you'd like to add to that bio that I just read? Or did I cover it all?
Thank you very much. That was a very good overview of what I did. Maybe just like I'm a trained lawyer. I had a very deep interest in journalism and what actually information and communication can do. And so that's how I ended in the media business. So I had an 8-year tenure at Bertelsmann as kind of like my first professional career step. So 8 years there. And then from there, I went to Microsoft with a little of a detour of 1 year. We might talk about that as well. And then I had these 18 years of at Microsoft with various stages going from consumer business to commercial. And the last 6 years I spent as country manager of Austria. After that, I really I was very interested in energy business and the way of how we get to a more renewable energy. So I joined E.ON in Germany in the middle of the energy crisis, a very, very exciting time. So spent 2 years there before joining Kyndryl 1.5 years ago. So just putting a couple of company names behind my vita to give a little bit more context. Thank you. Look, let's dive into the questions.
And where are you joining us from today, Dorothee? Which city are you in?
Today I'm in Munich.
Okay, and I'm joining from Vienna. And if you're with us, you can put in the chat where you are tuning in from as well. So why don't we just jump right into some questions that I've prepared for you, Dorothee. So our topic today is networking mastery. And I would like to understand what role networking has played in shaping your career trajectory, especially as you've climbed the ranks in global organizations. And are there any connections that surprised you in terms of their impact?
Yes. So first of all, first statement, networks are pivotal. I mean, they are super crucial. The more you are in senior leadership roles, the more value and the value also to your brand and network has. Yeah. So spending time on building network, investing into a network, and we'll talk about that later, and nurturing it is very, very important. We were talking probably about that later as well. Where it became very apparent for me was when I went in 2015 to Vienna, to join Microsoft as the CEO there. I didn't have any relations in Austria. I had only been twice for pleasure in Vienna. And for my role, it was very important that I get to know the C-suite, the CEOs of all of the major Austrian companies as fast as I can and build good relations. If I couldn't tap into a network that really helped me to build those relations in a minimum amount of time, I probably would have failed in that role. So that was probably the most notable moment in my life where I just saw what networks can do.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. I think that's a very interesting story that you just told there, because the fact is we think that when you are an executive that you just can sort of move to a city and everybody will embrace you with open arms, but it does take effort to build a network, doesn't it? And you have to be intentional about it.
Absolutely, you have to invest the time. So take that example. So I basically moved to Vienna, and I happened to meet one fabulous woman, Margarete Schramberg, who happened to be later Ministry of Exterior of in Austria. And Margarete invited me to a gathering she had of 20 women very early, like in the second or third week that I was there, just because she was interested in getting to know me. These 20 women in that evening were absolutely crucial for building my relations with the entire C-suite in Austria. I mean, you have to invest in that relationship because otherwise people don't trust you. And if they don't trust you, they will not open their address book for you, because they won't recommend you, because it also always is a question of their own brand if they open their address book and introduce you to other people. But that for me was really, really amazing to see what that can do. Important is that networks and relationships are always two ways. So you have to invest a lot to also get a lot, and it's not always at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think of networking, the word that always comes to mind is generosity. It's not, just about extracting things, extracting contacts from people, but also giving and giving quite openly and willingly, because it eventually will serve you. Let's talk about networking approaches. Do you think traditional approaches to networking, like meeting for coffee or attending events like the one that you just described that you attended all those years ago, has evolved? And how do you see digital platforms fitting into modern networking strategies?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. So first of all, I still truly believe that sitting down in a personal one-on-one or small groups of people, that's unbeatable. So the personal contact is just absolutely crucial. So one of my core coaching advices I always give also young female professionals is never lunch alone. Or, everybody always has time for a quick coffee. Yeah. So be curious and go out and meet people very purposefully. So it really depends also what is really at the core of what you want to achieve, and then kind of see who might be there to have, that lunch or that coffee with. So I think that is really, really important. On the other hand, having said that, of course, digital networks are amazing. So now I'm using LinkedIn a lot to just, to put myself out there. And I truly believe everybody has something to give. A lot of young women always say, hey, I have nothing to give. So, why should I put myself out on LinkedIn or, whatever other network? But I think LinkedIn is a very good one. And I think you have a lot to give because senior executives like myself, I mean, yes, I have 2 children, so I kind of do see a certain age range. They are under 20. So I'm very curious and very, very interested, for example, of how the younger generation communicates in order to make my communication to my team impactful. It's just an example. Yeah. So you have a lot to give. And the more you can put yourself out there with the authentic things that you have to say and to give, the more people are also interested in connecting with you. So building purposeful connections on, for example, LinkedIn, so searching people out and connecting yourself, but then also putting yourself out there with what you have to say that makes you interested is really a good way of building a network or supporting the search for building a good network.
Well, you make a good point, and that leads into my next question. Many women feel hesitant about self-promoting within their networks. And how can they overcome this discomfort about putting themselves out there, but also being authentic in some way? And before you answer that, Dorothee, I'd just like to tell folks who have joined us that if you have any questions, please put them in the comments, and Dorothee and I will do our best to try to answer them.
Sure.
So please.
Thank you. So I know that putting yourself out there is daunting, yeah, but you just need to do it. And people have different preferences. So if you feel more comfortable in a larger, but more anonymous group, many, at least larger companies, do have topical networks. Yeah, so there might be networks that are women's networks. It might be around a certain location. It might be around a certain interests, professional interests or private interests. So there are so many networks within a company, particularly when they are larger ones, that it's a great starting point to just introduce yourself in there in something that interests you and just start conversations. Other people are just better in the one-on-ones. So as I said, never lunch alone. A lot of people really have just time for coffee or virtual coffee. So just try it, and just be curious. Be really curious and open, and just listen to what the other person has to say with a very open mind. But then also think like what you might have to give. And as I said before, you probably have more to give than you actually think. Because a lot of senior execs are really, really interested in understanding of what a working life of a younger person in a company or a younger executive actually really looks like in order to optimize for communication, interaction, processes, skill sets, for their entire team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, when we talk about networking, I'd like to go back a little bit and talk about your career a little bit, because we didn't talk about your journey and we don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but I thought it might be interesting for folks to hear. You've likely received some career advice that didn't align with your initial goals or expectations. How did you decide when to trust the advice of others, even if it didn't fit into your original vision?
Yeah, that is a very good question. So Microsoft, for example, was very good at providing a program for mentoring and coaching. And so I was in the consumer business, which was absolutely not the core business of Microsoft at that time. So we are talking the early 2000s, yeah. And I had a very senior executive from the core business, and he started kind of like coaching me because, I knew that if I wanted to be successful within Microsoft, I needed to understand more deeply what is actually what's on his mind, what makes him successful. And also, like, my language was a very different one than the language that Microsoft was talking. So that was my kind of purpose. And then he basically at a certain time suggested like ideas of like how my career could be evolving more in like the more core Microsoft commercial side. And I had really seen myself on the more consumer, the fun, the advertising side of Microsoft. And I was on that typical, probably like what we always talk about, what as women we sometimes really do, is to say, oh, I can't do that. I don't have skills in that. I don't have that background. And he just reminded me to say, look, Dorothee, I have 30 years of experience as a senior leader, here within Microsoft. If I tell you I see you there, then I actually expect you to give me a little bit of trust. With all of my experience, I do that purposefully. So please trust me, and just give it a bit of a different thought. That was a bit like a slap in my face, because I said like, oh my God, I've offended that guy, But he was very right. It sometimes is also and I see that again and again, also like with young talents that I have promoted, and I needed to remind them to say like, can you please also trust maybe of my experience and why I see you with the potential, maybe not in the exact skill set, but just what you bring to the table, that you can be very successful. So that was for me a very pivotal moment, that sometimes it just makes a lot of sense to really trust also on the experience that these senior leaders bring, that they have a different view of you, and that you definitely, at least owe them a very open mind for exploration.
Not only do they have a different view, Dorothee, but they also understand strategically how the business is growing, right? And so
Exactly.
they have a little bit more insight than the actual employee has, which cannot be, underestimated, the power of that.
Yeah.
But when we talk about careers and networking, how can ambitious women intentionally build a network that aligns with their career goals and the strategic direction of the industry that they're part of?
Yeah. So, I mean, on the one hand, there are a lot of networks that you can purposefully join. And I always say, be very careful and deliberate in which networks you join, because you only have a very limited amount of time. So it's really important to see, do you want to join an industry network? Do you want to join a female network? Do you want to join and spend your time in an internal company network or external? All good options, but you kind of need to define what you really want to do. And if you have decided where you want to invest, and it really depends on the career goal you have, or maybe also like the exploration of the career path that you want to just feel if it's the right one for you, start investing in that network. So really start investing in relations, in relations in the network, build them up in order to give and also take, and don't be shy to also like ask for the advice, or put your out say, and just like I really do have that interest. I feel that I really want to develop myself in a certain direction. What's very important for that is that you don't limit yourself to your current job description. That's a very common mistake. You need to kind of put your brand in a context that other people who have a different work context can relate to that. So not talk about a specific role, but your strengths. So are you strong in communication or not? Are you more analytical? Are you more a salesperson? Are you more a people person? These things are very important, and they create your brand, and they make you more transferable to other role opportunity in a different context. So if I'm looking for a sales leader who's really strong engaging with customers, who basically also like is good in closing, who's kind of like number driven, that's a very different type of context than somebody who's very analytical, who kind of really loves to work back office, is very strategic maybe, who is much better than in a, finance context, or in a internal operational context. That's important, so that people then in the network also can relate to you. And then you basically, because relations and network relations plus your brand is really what makes you at the end successful.
Yeah. I'm glad that you mentioned branding, because, I work with executive women, and I do a lot of corporate training. And when I bring up branding, oftentimes people cringe, because they think of, social media personas that talk about their personal brand. And they think that this is something that is only for those people who are putting themselves out there just trying to get a lot of likes. But I think the context that you built around branding is so incredibly important. What do people think about when your name comes up? That's part of your brand, isn't it? And what do people say about your skills and your reliability and how you show up and how you interact with people? And the brand can be as wide and as deep as you allow people to understand it to be by you carving it and defining it for yourself. So we have some questions here. We have a question here from Sigrid. If you want to start your network in a new sector location, what is your recommendation on how to get in touch with new contacts? Well, this is something that you mentioned earlier before when you moved to Vienna. So maybe you want to refresh that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it really depends also, like, if you already have a good network of where you are. So I probably need to mention my strongest network is an amazing network that's called Generation CEO, that's in Germany, Austria, Switzerland. And these are by now nearly 200 enormously successful, fabulous women in the very top executive roles, executive and non-executive. So if somebody would send me to Singapore today, and I have no real relations there, my first go-to point would be that network, and just very openly just ask the question, who's there, who knows somebody who can connect me. And if you don't have that, LinkedIn in a sense can do the same thing. So just kind of search your digital or your physical network for some connection point and be so open. If you have open conversation with people and are really determined to listen, you will be amazed of what kind of comes up. And usually one first relation leads to the next one. Another piece, and I really have to articulate, I kind of like always have been in the larger corporate worlds, so larger companies. These companies usually have some kind of networks in all of the locations. Many times there's a female network, and I would say all of the large companies these days have some shape or form of women's networks. That's a great starting point, a very great starting point. And most of the time, women who join a women's networks are very open to help you on that first step and make the first relations. If not, join a sports club or whatever. I mean, usually it's so interesting to see where you find the people. And again, go out, have a coffee and just never lunch alone. Be open-minded of what people tell you. And I'm sure, you make the first step. And once you have that first step, people, if you invest into that relationship, they will invest in you and forward your contact to the next person. So that would be my advice.
And just to add on to that excellent advice, please do not underestimate the power of LinkedIn Live and audio events. I have actually met people in LinkedIn Live events and audio events who eventually I developed a relationship. We started to DM one another. We started to exchange. We had virtual coffee over Zoom. Some of them I've even met in person, and some of them have even evolved into business opportunities. So, I would really encourage you to rethink what networking means. It doesn't always mean that you have to physically be someplace. You can also do it in the digital space as well. And there are lots of opportunities to do that. We have another question here. Thank you so much for the wonderful talk. My question is, what if you cannot give much to your network because you are not in a position to be able to give them what they need at the moment? It's mostly a very uncomfortable situation. You touched on this a little bit earlier, Dorothee. Would you like to add something else to that?
Yeah, so this is a very broad question and really needs to fall into the very individual context. So my first encouragement in bring your authentic self to that network. You will find many times what people interest might not be the first thing that you have been talking about. So my example, I have been very active for a very long time, nonprofit, with a children's organization called Plan International, locally in Germany, but also in international forums. Many of my connections and deep relations have resulted from that piece of work, because people are just very interested in also like nonprofit work or have a passion for nonprofit. I make this example because you might find people are interested in yourself and what you are doing in other areas than, I don't know, the tech sector, AI, digital forum that you just joined, yeah, or where you think like, hey, you know, I'm really a starter and not just a senior, yeah. And I made another example earlier around like, you know, communications and how younger people actually live in an organization that usually good leaders, senior leaders are very interesting to explore. So put some topics out there that are important, and just, you know, try again and again. Just, you know, if one person doesn't react, just go to the next one and invest in building those relationships. It's not easy. Not everything works. Not all coffees are great, yeah, that you will have, your virtual ones. But I'm sure if you put yourself out there, and even if you have a conversation where you say, hey, you know, this is a bit, you know, not sure how this could fit, ask that person if he might know somebody, yeah, or a anchor point in the company that might fit for your kind of first step. But again, you know, if you just have the courage to go out and do it. And I would say in, I don't know, 80-90% of the cases, you have more to say and to give than you think.
Yeah, that's very sound advice. I'd also like to add something to that. I think there's also a bit of intimidation when one goes to a large networking event, that one puts a lot of pressure on themselves that they have to meet a lot of people. And this is absolutely not the case. You know, you could set yourself a very small target and say, I'm in this room of 200 people, and my ambition is to meet 2 people today. And you will achieve that. And this takes so much pressure off of you, of thinking that you have to accumulate connections, because that's not what networking is about. It's about having relationships and an open exchange with people. And you can do that with 2 people at an event. You can't do that with 50 people at an event. What do you think is the biggest mistake women make when networking within their own organizations? And what's one action they could take today to avoid this pitfall?
That's an interesting question. So I think, networking always is good, but kind of work needs to come first. So, you know, it needs to be a good balance. That is really, really important. I think also be purposeful in what is why you join a network, what the network is actually about, and does the network have also like goals that are, you know, accepted by the company. So what I've seen, there are sometimes women's networks in large corporations that don't really have the buy-in from the senior leadership, because just, you know, it somehow doesn't match the purpose of what the women's network has with what the corporate leadership tries to achieve, or you might see things at purpose. And yes, you know, sometimes, particularly if you have a very male leadership team, they want to see actions and outcomes, né? And you know, a great network result is just basically building relations. So that sometimes doesn't match so well in the perception of, you know, what you should do. So I would say build it purposefully, but also like don't over communicate or overspend time. Don't join too many. Make it purposeful, because it actually is part of the business life. At the end of the day, you will be judged by being successful in your job, in your role. So, you know, that networking needs to fit nicely into it. And, you know, if you basically over invest time in a network, or also over communicate that network and your purpose, particularly when you haven't established yet your credibility in the role, it might just give the wrong vibe within the company. They said like, oh, now she's just like about networking, and, you know, first she should actually deliver results. So don't get me wrong, networking is super important, should be very purposeful, needs also a deliberate time invest. But I think the way that you invest it and the way that you communicate about it is actually really important. So that's a bit the direction I would give, but it's very personal, I would say.
Thank you. Dorothee, believe it or not, we've come to the end of our time together. And I wanted to know if you had any parting words for our listening audience today.
Well, I mean, yes, I always have parting words. So, first of all, never lunch alone. Please really take that as a core coaching advice. It has always worked, in building your horizon, broadening your network, and usually, making you aware of opportunities that you didn't even think that are out there, just because you basically start to know another context. And then I always would say, just have the courage, put yourself out there. Always into areas that you have a lot of passion for. So the way I made my career, so maybe this is a little bit at the end, I didn't go straight up, and, I went from large teams. My large team at E.ON was a couple of 100, 600, 700 people. At the moment, I have a very small team because I work very, very virtual. So it might go sideways, upways, very different, very diverse. But for me, always the core was be very, very passionate about what I want to do. I always want to learn a lot. So I put learning into the core forefront of what, how I actually choose my roles. And then very deliberately see who are the people in my life that I want to relate with. As I said, I have the Generation CEO as a fantastic female network, still a great network in Austria, and some, other mentors and networks over my business life. And I'm heavily relying on them. So don't be shy to pull from them, but also invest. Now, always see what you can give back to them. It might not be at the same time, but it's really important that this is something that's holding the balance. And I think with that, whatever your passion is, you will have a great career and fulfilled life.
Thank you for those sage words. So we've come to the end of our broadcast. Thank you for those who are listening to us live, and thank you to those who will listen to the replay. You will find this episode on Apple and Spotify and all other streaming platforms next week on Tuesday. And in the meantime, if you have any other questions, you can put them in the chat and we will answer them when we are offline. Again, Dorothee Ritz, thank you for being with us today, and thank you for sharing your experience and your insights. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you for having me.